My dog doesn't listen to my mom. Listens good to me, doesn't listen to my mom. How involved has your wife been in this process? Because that's going to dictate the amount of respect and the amount that the dog actually responds to and listens to your wife. The day you pick them up is the day you start training them. That's the day you start forming habits. They're always learning, we're always training. We assume that they should understand our language. They don't. Sometimes it's not even verbal, it's body language. Sometimes our body language is telling them one thing and we're verbally thinking we're telling them another thing, and they respond to our body language, which is not what we're asking them to do verbally, and we get upset with it because they're disobeying. No, they're not disobeying, they're responding exactly how you're communicating to them. How come they're not doing it? How come they shut down? And so you got to be constantly analyzing the situation that way. And it just takes a mindset and an understanding of that. We are going to dig right in here on this podcast. We're going to hit some Facebook questions. None of them are real giant ones, and they're actually ones that I haven't even had a chance to respond to. Some of these are just sent to me in the last 24 hours. But I thought we're just going to do kind of a random shotgun approach here and knock out a few of these questions that I know people have the same question, and that's why I like using Facebook. I like using Instagram. I like using those platforms and questions that we get, because not only I do answer them direct, not all of them end up being podcast questions, but I do think that they turn into nice talking points. So he says he's been following us for a while and recently bought the shed training kit. He's got an 18-week-old lab. This is from Scott. He says, I'm curious if you could help me with this issue. My lab is training really well and does a good job listening to me. When it comes to my wife, he doesn't listen that great. Any tips would be appreciated. Scott, and he said, thanks, Scott. So Scott had a question. We just posted not too long ago, we did one of our Bella Be Good episodes that recently posted within the last couple of weeks was we went to a local high school, Bayport High School here in Green Bay, or just outside of Green Bay, and we did a demonstration. We brought Bella, I think we had Spry, and I think we maybe had Taylor with. Yeah, so we had the three of them. We did some demonstration on just basic hunting dog type stuff. Really, it always kind of brings itself back to foundational work. It's usually where people are struggling the most. It's where this guy, Scott, would be focused at 18 weeks old. 18-week-old puppy is great age. I love them when they get to about that 16-week-old range. I feel like they're really starting to absorb stuff. We're through a lot of the early on stuff like housebreaking. Some of those habits are starting to form and stick. So when we did that seminar, I will call it, or a little demonstration at the high school, one of the questions that came up in the crowd was a gal that said, my dog doesn't listen to my mom. Listens good to me, doesn't listen to my mom. And so that we talk about that in that video. In this situation, you're saying listens to me really well, doesn't listen to my wife. So a few of my questions go back to you, Scott, and say, well, how involved is your wife in the training? Because at 18 weeks old, you probably got the dog about 10 weeks ago. 10 or 11 weeks ago. 7 to 8 weeks is usually when you're bringing the puppy home. When you bring the puppy home at that age, training starts immediately. I always tell people the day you pick them up is the day you start training them. That's the day you start forming habits. They're always learning, we're always training. So my question goes back to, well, how involved has your wife been in this process? Because that's going to dictate the amount of respect and the amount that the dog actually responds to and listens to your wife. If your wife doesn't have any contact with the young dog, it's going to be very difficult to expect results, because you would be in the same boat. If you hadn't done much with the puppy for the last 10 weeks, the pup wouldn't respond well to you. Whatever you've done in the last 10 weeks has created this connection and this trust and this feel between you and the dog has understanding of your expectations, likely, which is why you're saying training's going pretty well for me. So a lot of that has to do with the amount of interaction you've had and the understanding that the dog has of what is expected. And so if your wife doesn't relay the same messages to the dog when asking for something or requiring something or leading in some fashion or way, the dog is going to look at your wife like a stranger and go, I don't know what you want to do. It's maybe she's speaking a different language. If you came to me and spoke Chinese, I'd look at you cross-eyed and go, no idea. And so if you were saying to me something like, I need you to come over here and pick this up. It's very important. And you said it to me in a language I don't understand. I'm going to stand there. And you're going to look at me and go, if you don't realize that you're speaking a different language, if you're speaking a different language, you understand, boy, he doesn't understand me. So what is he doing? Nothing. What if I actually tried to do something and it was wrong? You would go, he's doing it wrong because he doesn't understand what I asked him to do. But a lot of times we as trainers and people and human beings just don't start thinking along that way. We don't think along the lines of how an animal communicates and understands and reacts and responds. And so we just assume they should speak English. We assume that they should understand our language. They don't. And so sometimes it's not even verbal, it's body language. Sometimes our body language is telling them one thing and we're verbally thinking we're telling them another thing, and they respond to our body language, which is not what we're asking them to do verbally, and we get upset with it because they're disobeying. No, they're not disobeying, they're responding exactly how you're communicating to them with body language. And they may be responding exactly right to whatever body language it is you're putting on them. It's just you don't want them to do that. So so at that point you have to understand, I'm talking to them in the wrong language. And so figure out the right language. So with your wife, my tip is your wife needs to become involved with the training process more deeply. Your wife needs to get into the idea of what are these commands looking like, sounding like, acting like? What is it that you're doing when you get good results? Because the dog understands it. Then it needs to be replicated. And that's where consistency comes in. So I like at 18 weeks old, I'm a big proponent of the idea of feeding times. I love feeding times. Dogs are usually very, very interested in earning the reward when it comes to it being food. So I like feeding times. I would recommend your wife get involved with that. I hope you're using some structure in your feeding times. If you're not, you should. If you are, she should too. So you start incorporating her into that, and then the dog starts to look at it and go, you know what? That lady there, she gives me stuff when I do things right too. She rewards me when I do things right too. And then you start building a rapport. Both that lady there and that dog start to understand and get a feel for each other. They start to get to understand what's expected, when it's expected, how it's expected. And so you start to develop what I call a lot of feel for each other. You understand what's coming. And the dog does too. And once the dog does too, then the dog's not caught off guard. A lot of times I think dogs shut down when they don't know what to do. It's just a mechanism of theirs is stop doing anything. You can't do it wrong if you don't do anything at all. So a lot of times when we put them in an uncomfortable position, they shut down. And so that needs to be recognized by the handler and not frustrating to the handler. I have talked with and dealt with and worked with some trainers that, it goes back to the word patience and the need and the necessity for it as a handler. You need to be patient when you're a parent. You need to be patient when you're a boss. You need to be patient when you're a teacher. You need to be patient when you're a dog trainer. And when you're a dog owner, you're a dog trainer. And so there's no way around it. They don't come as finished goods. It's a process that you're very involved with. So you have to have that level of patience and understanding and the wherewithal to say, how come they're not doing it? How come they shut down? And so you got to be constantly analyzing the situation that way. And it just takes a mindset and an understanding of that in the first place, and then doing it a lot of times in a row to have it become normal, have it become natural. So I think your wife has to become involved. I hope at 18 weeks, I hope you're working on some stuff like maybe some heel work, some remote sits, some recall, all of those things. This is a great opportunity for you to not, and this is going to sound cheesy, but you can connect with your wife better. Like if you involve her, incorporate her, there might be a little bit of artwork to an approach of a craft. You need to maybe work this in so that you say to her, I'd like you to become more involved with what me and Fido are doing. And she may look at that one of two ways. She might look at that and go, wow, that's awesome. I want to become involved. She may look at it and go, it's not my dog. Now, if she says it's not my dog and I don't want to be involved with it, you're going to probably run into some issues because she's creating a wall of separation between her and the dog, you and the dog, you and her with the dog. So that's a that's a big dynamic that you got to work towards improving. So by involving her, I do think it can be, if she's anything like my wife would go, oh, great. I'd like to do more stuff with you. I like being involved with the things that are going on. So you may have an opportunity to look at this as you develop and grow on your relationship with her as well by incorporating her into it. The more parts and pieces that are meshed together, the better the thing rolls along. If you start creating division, separation, it just, dogs aren't dumb. And dogs understand if you don't like them, they know that. Dogs sense and feel stuff way better than we do. And I think we can as well, but I think they do way more than we do. And so if there is a sense of love for that dog, and love can't just mean blindly and allow 100% freedom. Sometimes love, you love your dog into a situation of success because your love is a little firmer. You've created some boundaries. You've created some expectations that you hold the dog to. That's love too. It's not, love just doesn't mean you wear a fanny pack full of treats and give it to them whenever. I think that's bribery. So you got to be careful and understand that. But I think, this whole thing can foster a much stronger relationship and connection, which ultimately never ends up bad. It always ends up better. And so I think you can work towards that with your wife as well. So wife's got to become involved. Wife needs to become a leader. You have a pack there with you, your wife, and the dog. And if there's kids involved, that complicates it even more. That's the pack. And so the dog has to understand where it is in the pack. And that doesn't mean you got to be a big bully and beat it up. It doesn't mean you got to be a big boss and be hard on the dog and dominate this little. You don't have to be a gladiator in the battle here. You got to have some respect for each other, and there's got to be an understanding of where the dog stands in your family, where it stands in your pack, and it can't be on top. It can't be the leader. It can't be the one who dictates and decides what's going to happen, when it's going to happen, how it's going to happen. That's you. So becoming a strong leader, building your wife up to become a strong leader in the presence of the dog. I'm not going to get into the idea of who's in charge, you or the wife. I'll let you figure that stuff out. But I do think that both you and her have to be a solid, positive influence in that young dog's life. And then that way you can lead it going forward. So that's the answer to that one. I'm going to look here. I'm just going to scroll down. So this came from someone who sent us some messages. Looks like he's got a hound. He sent me quite a few messages. He brought in, so I've gotten messages for about a month now, and there's about 10 of them that have gone back and forth. So his last message to me was, I waited until I listened to all your podcasts. So he listens to them. Up to this point, before asking, you hear Ellie in the background whining a little bit. She's ready to go outside. But up until this, before asking questions, many of the questions were answered. The one I keep coming back to is crate training. Every dog I have ever had has been an outside dog because my sister was extremely allergic to animals. My dogs have always had a kennel with their doghouse and then a dog run attached. I've never had a problem with a dog wanting to get in a crate to go hunting, as I've worked with them in training to get in. With crate training your dogs, pretty much first thing, do you think if I keep kenneling my new puppy outside like I have in the past, and also working on crate training during the day, during the downtime, when they get wore out and ready to sleep, that I would be allowing the dog to form a bad habit that would make training harder? Long story short question, would your approach be any different with strictly outside dogs, and if so, how? No, I don't think it makes a damn difference at all. I think the idea, so you're talking about two different actions here. The one action when I tell a dog to kennel up or get in their crate, it could be for a variety of reasons. Part of that reason could be what you're looking for. I think what you're asking is separating the idea of a spot for them to kind of just be, when they're out in their run, which would be like an outside kennel. If I'm envisioning this right, it's an outside kennel with a doghouse or crate that's inside of it, and they go and they lay in it. My dog's free. You just heard Ellie whining. Ellie's in a crate right now, and she's whining and would like to go outside. So she kind of whined a little bit, and she got up and she scratched a little bit, and you might have been able to hear that. So a lot of times if I leave that door open, the door is closed right now. If I left the door open, a lot of times my dogs will lay in there if they have the option. So they feel comfortable, which I'm assuming your dog in the outside kennel run would do the same. Probably go into its doghouse or its crate and just lay in there. It's a nice place to get out of the sun, get into some whatever. It's comfortable, it's safe. Now, there's a difference between that and telling a dog to load up into a kennel or crate in the truck. And so I do that as well at times. A lot of times my dogs don't ride in the crates because I don't have enough room for the dogs to ride in the crates in the truck. So a lot of times most of my dogs I train to ride on the floor. They ride on in the extended cab, they ride on the floor. In the driver's side, or passenger side, they ride on the floor. If I do, now Bella, for instance, I have a small crate, just a small little plastic crate that I put in the back, extended cab part. And I kenneled her up this last weekend when I went up north. The other dogs laid loosely in the they just laid on the floor. But Bella I put in the kennel because I wasn't going to be able to pay attention to her, and I don't want her to chew on something. Now, she hasn't proven to be a chewer, and I have avoided that because I did not allow her to get into that habit. Pretty soon, I probably feel pretty comfortable with her just laying on the floor with the other dogs. But out of habit, I put a small crate in there and I kenneled her up in it. Now, I don't want to have to wrestle her to get her into that crate, so I give her a, come on, let's go, kennel up, get up, and she jumps up there pretty willingly. That just is a transfer from what we did in our laundry room, where the crates and kennels are right now that you hear Ellie in. I've got 2 crates in there, and I'll kennel up a Bella at night. I kennel her up, and she goes in there. One of the ways I got her to do it was, I've never turned that into punishment. I've never turned the idea of you've been bad, go in your kennel, go in your crate. We try to make it pretty positive. I feed the dogs in there after a while. I get them into a game of how quickly can I, at dinner time, at feeding times, how quickly can I, when I say kennel up, how quickly can they get in there? Because the quicker they get in there, they're going to get their bowl of food. So I turn it into a little bit of a game. I get them excited about the idea of there may be some reward outside of me just saying good boy or good girl when they go into that kennel. We do that consistently enough, it becomes a habit. Kennel, they run into the kennel. That kennel, whether it's in the laundry room or it's on the floor of my truck, doesn't really matter. Now, that's a big jump. So maybe I take that kennel out, and if I'm having a dog that's struggling with it, I may have to get the dog to understand to get up into the truck without the kennel to start out with. Sometimes the kennel might actually help the situation because it's familiar to them. So I've had dogs that struggle to load up into the truck. They just don't want to get into that truck. So I can't turn it into a game of catch the dog. Instead, if that were the case, I'd put the dog on a leash. I'd put the dog on a lead, and I'd just heel them out to it because they're comfortable with heeling. They feel good. They feel safe next to me. I heel them out, and I encourage them up into the truck. Hell, I might feed them in the back of the truck, in the extended cab part. I might put a bowl of food in there and get them a reward of feeding time. They're going to go eat in the truck. I'm going to do the exact same thing where I'm going to convince this dog that truck is not so bad. Just because they go up into that truck doesn't mean we got to drive for 5 hours, especially if they don't like it. A lot of times my dogs enjoy loading up into the trucks because I think they connect the idea of we're going somewhere. When we go somewhere, it's usually pretty fun. We don't just travel to go to the vet. We travel to go hunting. We go travel to go walking. We go travel to do different things that the dogs typically enjoy. So it's transferring the behavior of, or connecting the behavior of loading up into the truck to going somewhere fun. So I do think it's just a completely different thing you're looking to do. So you've not had issues with loading your dogs into the truck, and that's because probably the same thing. They probably connect it with something that they really like. The idea of training the dog to kennel up in the house as a house dog or training the dog to kennel up into the truck is one and the same. I think I think it's just a transformation of where you're doing it. You're just moving locations. So I hope that answers your question. Do I think it's anything to be worried about? Not at all. I'd take the exact same approach. The only difference is, I guess, with the outside dog, and I don't keep my dogs outside in kennel runs, but the difference would be here's what I would do if I did keep them outside in kennel runs, and I have put my dogs in outside kennel runs before. I actually use the same command. We have one over at the farm that we hunt on. There's an outside kennel run there that we'll occasionally put the dogs into. And it's nice outside, and it's shaded, so there's no, they're out of the sun. But it's a I don't know, it's probably like 10 by 6 or something, 10 by 8, something like that. And we can put multiple dogs in there. And there are crates in there as well that we leave the doors open on. But I don't necessarily force the dog to go into the crate. Instead, I tell them, get kennel up, and they go into the big kennel. So it's just the same command for me represents go to a spot that's enclosed and secure. So it might be an 8 by 10 kennel. It might be a 2 by 2 crate or whatever the size of those crates are. It might be the truck. Kennel up might mean jump up into the truck. So I think you can use a similar command to do a similar action. You just change the specifics of it, and I think the dogs transition to that real well. So I don't think you're going to run into any issues. I wouldn't approach the training any differently than what you are doing. So that's it. Got 2 nice questions out of this. That one was from Cody. Cody, I'll send you a message. I'll let you know that we answered this in a podcast. I'm going to get your t-shirt size and we'll send you a t-shirt. And then the first one, who was that first question from?
Scott.
Scott. So Scott's going to get a message back from me as well. And I'll shoot you a message, shoot me a t-shirt size, and we'll get you guys taken care of. That's it. Number 57 is in the book. So thank you guys for the support. Please continue to support us. If you would do us a favor, leave us a review. If you're not subscribed to the podcast, I recommend it, and I ask you a favor to do it. I also ask you to share it with someone that you think it might help. So thank you guys. We appreciate the support more than you know. For a small company like ours, projects like this are very, very rewarding, and it comes from feedback that we're getting, not only in questions, but also in, hey, I've just listened to the podcast. I can't tell you how good it feels, and I get a lot of them, and I'm really happy about it. When people say, I binge listened to your podcast, because I am guilty of binge listening at times. My wife binge watches stuff on, I don't know, Netflix or something like that. And I think it's nuts because I go, man, you just spent a lot of time watching it, but she just can't get enough of it. And she watches the whole series. To me, that's the ultimate compliment. If we can hold on to your attention and you want to listen to me talk that much about dogs, it's the ultimate compliment. So I thank you for that. I appreciate it. We'll continue to do our best to give you guys good stuff. So thanks again, and we'll continue putting these out.